This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
My name is Hannah Brody, and I'm a student correspondent with ZeroNow. And today we are talking to one of the co-founders of Omnilert, Ara Bagdasarian. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Hannah.
So for those who don't know, Omnilert was founded in 2004 as the first emergency notification system. The idea was sparked following the tragedy of Jean Cleary on her own college campus. Can you elaborate on the start and creation of Omnilert?
Sure. The idea came around in the probably early 2003, and I had a web development company in the mid to late 90s when the whole dot-com boom was happening. And one of my customers was this Swedish gentleman by the name of Nick Gustafson, who had a two-way texting system for the deaf population up in Baltimore, and it was called ReachNet. And this was way before people were using text messages, and it was a very specific use case for those that were hard of hearing. And it was innovative at the time. And we were talking about text messages, and we would text one another. And I was reading a story about a student by the name of Jean Cleary who was raped and murdered in her dorm room back in 1986. And the article went on to talk about how her family, as you can imagine, were upset, and they wanted to determine what can be done to prevent this from ever happening again. And they through their investigation, they realized had she been made aware of the serial rapist, she might have been a little bit more vigilant, locked her dorm room, walk with another student. And so in 1990, they lobbied Congress and passed what's called the Cleary Act, also known as the Campus Safety Act, which requires campuses to notify their community of a preventable crime in a timely manner. And so when I was reading that article and just connecting the dots with the text messaging, I thought, man, what if we could use text messages as a way to blast information to students' cell phones to provide emergency information to keep them out of harm's way? So I called the Cleary family, the Cleary Center, and shared the concept with them. They thought it was a great idea. Called my partner and said, hey, listen, we could use text messages. And so we went to the first, we had a meeting with Anne Arundel Community College in Annapolis, Maryland, and we shared the idea with them, and they got it, and they wanted to use it. So in September of 2004, we signed up Anne Arundel Community College, which was the first campus to use. It was called E2 Campus back in the day. When we first launched, we were E2 Campus, which then became Omnilert. And it has now become, when we started, the whole idea was to become the new standard in campus safety and school safety. And almost 20 years later, that really has become, it's called an emergency notification system today. We didn't even have a name for it back then. It was just E2 Campus, and it really, after the Virginia Tech massacre, it really became a priority. So we went from about 30 campuses in 2007 to about 300 campuses in just a matter of like a few months, and we now have over 2,500 customers across the board, from schools, campuses, to corporations and government.
That's awesome. So I know, I was looking at the website, and over the course of time, it looks like Omnilert worked to integrate with other platforms like social networking, and then obviously texting, and all those things. So in what ways has Omnilert impacted campus safety to date, and how do you hope to see it expand in its impact?
That's awesome, and Hannah, that's what we call multimodality, or we call it omnimodal, being able to send communications to every possible communications endpoint that you can imagine. We started off, it was text messages, emails. There was AOL back then. We sent to AOL and Yahoo. They still exist, but yeah, being able to send to every digital signage, classrooms, whiteboards, smartboards in the classrooms, alarm systems, televisions on a college campus, the lobby screens in a school. Being able to send to every possible mechanism is absolutely critical, and that's what we perfected. That's what we pioneered back in the day, is being able to get the word out to every possible mechanism. Because with any technology, not one technology is perfect. Every technology will have the potential to fail, whether it's cell phone networks being down, your local area network being down, telephone lines being down. So if you get a message out to every possible mechanism, then you basically create that redundancy, so someone will receive the message regardless of any issues.
So that's actually interesting that you touched on that, because my next question was going to be about challenges and like obstacles faced, because obviously like this is a truly revolutionary software. As you said, like it wasn't known as an emergency notification system, it was known as like E2K or Omnilert. And so what are like the challenge, besides what you just mentioned, what are other challenges you faced, and like how did you overcome them, and more so like what motivated you to overcome those challenges?
Well, there are challenges we faced then that we're facing now, because anytime you have a brand new technology that is disruptive, that doesn't exist prior to that, there's always caution in moving forward. And the challenge is finding those visionaries, the customers that really get it and that are they see the value. They want to be the first kid on the block with this new technology. And so when we started E2 Campus, Hannah, it may sound crazy, but back then I had people tell me that this was a horrible idea. Who wants a text message sent to their cell phone? Like, cell phones are for making phone calls. That it sounds crazy to hear that today, but that was a challenge that we had back then, is trying to introduce a new concept to the market. And we're facing that today. We've got new technology called Gun Detect, which is an artificial intelligence powered visual gun detection technology. So any school, campus can install this on their network, monitoring their cameras, their surveillance cameras. And once a firearm is detected, you can initiate in a lockdown sequence in a matter of seconds. So if there's a firearm detected outside a building, if somebody's walking into the building with an AR-15, for example, and it's detected in a camera, you could instantly lock the doors, notify the people inside the building, call first responders, law enforcement, sound an alarm, take any action before a shot is actually fired. And so that's a new technology that we have today that is still being adopted. We're still in the evangelism phase of it. But bottom line is, you already have cameras set up on a school or a campus. Why not use them for proactive threat detection rather than just using for forensics after the fact? Well, we'll go back and watch the tape of the gunman walking into the school. Why not identify that gun when that person walks into the school before they enter the school, and then lock down automatically? And that's one of the technologies we have too. I didn't mention that, was the automation, like being able to pre-script a response. So if you have a lockdown scenario, you could pre-script all of that into the Omnilert system. And with whether it's a gun that's detected or a human, or like you have an Apple Watch, you could hit a lockdown button on your watch, and you could initiate 50 actions in a matter of seconds.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it seems like Omnilert has like expanded from this emergency notification system to all other means of like keeping campuses safe. So obviously, like, you're obviously wanting to keep growing. So what other ways can other people get involved who aren't necessarily in the company? Or I'm going to college, so obviously I know like Buckeye Alert is like what we use to get like the messages. And so what other ways can like students like my age get involved in this movement to bring it back to zero, obviously?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked that. So in 2020, after founding the company, like I said, almost 20 years ago, I decided it was time to hire a CEO for Omnilert, and we found an awesome CEO after like a year search. And so I could focus on my passions, which are school safety. And me and a few other folks have been discussing about how school safety is fragmented, and we've got different organizations doing different things. You've got technology companies doing their thing, nonprofits doing their thing. Schools are trying to put it all together. How do we do this, including students? And so we created a stakeholder organization called ZeroNow, which is what we're talking about now. And the whole idea was to form this stakeholder organization to help facilitate collaboration between all of our partners and members to drive ideas, innovation, and investment in advancing school safety. And so we encourage students to participate in ZeroNow. We're launching a new community in the next couple of weeks where students can register to be a member of ZeroNow. There's a membership fee for corporations, individuals, but we have a special tier for students that there's no cost. And we want students to be part of the conversation. And even this, Hannah, it's like having discussions like this is important, but we want to hear your thoughts, your concerns, and your ideas, because you may have a great idea about, well, what if we were able to do this? Or why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? But have your voice shared with a community of stakeholders, innovative companies, thought leaders, that people have been involved in school safety for decades, and those that are working in school safety at Ohio State or different campuses, universities, and schools like York High School, for example. Getting those folks together as part of the conversation is absolutely critical. We want to have your voice in part of that conversation.
That's awesome. And then my final question is just you've talked so much about all these different technologies that are just all about school safety. Is there anything that like in your mind that you are working towards or like hope to see in terms of like technology in the future? Because obviously you have the AI with the gun detection and the emergency notification system, and now like ZeroNow, which isn't necessarily technology but just like a means of getting information out. Is there any like rise in technology you're hoping to see that you're hoping to expand off of?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's critical is for technologies to work together, and through ZeroNow establishing standards, interoperability between the different technologies. Because I was just at a conference a couple weeks ago, and the number one thing I kept hearing from school safety administrators is that we want this or we need this, but it doesn't work with what we already have, or this doesn't play with our other technology. And so it's important for us as an industry to establish that interoperability, to be able to have connections. So and more importantly is when we get to the stage where we can automate workflows. So like I mentioned, the goal here, Hannah, is to prevent harm from happening, right? And getting ahead of that, looking for, especially with active assailant, looking for behavioral issues, school issues at school, law enforcement issues, but getting ahead of that situation before something actually happens. And then if that fails, then we need to respond to mitigate the scope of harm. So how quickly can we respond and mitigate the scope of harm? And only through having integrated technologies that work together, that can be automated. Like I mentioned, if a firearm is detected, if a gun is detected, how quickly can you notify every classroom, lock the doors if you need to lock the doors, you decide what you need to do, call law enforcement, call your EMTs, emergency medical technicians to come on site. Update Facebook, update Twitter, so mom and dad know, hey, do not come to school, we are under lockdown. But having all of that pre-scripted, ready to go, and there's different technologies that need to work together: the digital signs, the alerting system, the emergency notification system, the dispatch communications technology. All of those aspects need to be able to work together, and that's what we're trying to do with ZeroNow, is to put those pieces together. So there is a comprehensive solution. There is interoperability between the different technologies that exist. Well, let me ask you, what are your biggest concerns? You're starting at Ohio State this fall. So what are your concerns?
Well, I know like my mom and I like in this thought. I'm obviously from suburbia, so there's very little in terms of gun like laws that we have to worry about. Obviously, we're very passionate about it, but we don't really see it firsthand where I live in. So going to the capital of a state like Ohio, where you turn the wrong corner and suddenly you're off campus and in a place. It can be really scary in terms of like seeing stories and not being from that area. So I think in terms of campus, like college is a whole new playing field for safety for students, because a lot of times they're going to a place they've never been before and don't really know like, where am I turning? Like, am I turning onto a road that is, because like you just don't have the common sense. Like you can be street smart, but until you live in a place for a while, you don't really know how street smart you have to be. Mm-hmm. And so as one of the few out of state people, I'm definitely leaning on like my peers and definitely Buckeye alerts to help me in that area, and in terms of like, where should I be walking and what street should I avoid, especially when it's dark. So as a college student, it's definitely a big influencer in terms of like the safety and where I go to college, if like what safety measures they implement.
And do you think that students are thinking about safety all the time, or is it, because I know when I was in college, I was invincible. Nothing will ever happen.
No, I feel like these days, and I hate to like bring like gender into it, but I feel like females are a lot more inclined to be, like, at least when I talk to like my girlfriends, they're always like, oh yeah, don't walk somewhere alone. Whereas like the guys are like, oh yeah, like let's go out at like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, okay, well, are one of you picking me up? Because there's no way I'm walking there alone. And so I feel like there's definitely a difference in that respect of like what they see as like being unsafe. But I feel like in terms of like Buckeye alerts, everyone knows that Buckeye alert. Like sometimes it's a joke that we get so annoyed by how frequent they are, because like you just always want to be proactive, which is like your big thing, is like making sure it gets to the news or to to the right officials before it even has to result in casualties. And so I think like everyone's aware of like the safety concerns, especially in Columbus because it's a big city. But I do think in terms of like what the concerns are, there's definitely people who appreciate it more than others, especially when it comes to like everyone I know, especially female, who carries pepper spray. Everyone carries like all this stuff, and so I think it's definitely helpful, especially when you hear about Jean Cleary and like I've heard so many things like this that have come out of that case and everything because that was just such a game changer in terms of like oh like this stuff happens like south side of Chicago or like other cities like you only hear about it in like these like specific areas and then you think like a college campus like that's school like no one's really thinking like oh I'm gonna go to school today and like no that's just not a place where like you associate with violence. And so I think that was really like a turning point for everyone but regardless of who you are when you're going to college you automatically think like what's the safety rating? Like I go on niche, which is like what people use to research colleges now, and like they have a whole safety rating, and if it's like a C, I'm like, no, I'm not really gonna apply there anymore.
Right.
And so I think it definitely has been a game changer in terms of like the safety of campuses.
Now, do the students that you know, I mean, are they downloading the safety app? Like if they need help, they'll hit the button, or is it
Yeah, I think I know a lot of people like obviously I'm a teenager so I'm on TikTok all the time and there's like all these things about like oh use this if like you're in an Uber or like some type of car where you don't feel safe and it's like there's people making sounds so it sounds like you're like on the phone with someone and there's certain things like bracelets you can even get now where like you hold it down and like it sends out a message to like your top 3 people and so I think people are realizing like not only can you profit off of this like idea of like people wanting to feel safer now. But you can also like make a serious change in like I'm all geared up with like the bracelets and the alarms and all the apps like and so I think what's really changing is like not only is our awareness changing because of the events but because of like everything people are doing to prevent it. So like when you see the people like all these things you're like, oh, I didn't really think of that as like concerning, but now since you've created this app or created this thing, like, oh, that probably is better to have than not. Like what's the harm in having that app or what's the harm in having that product? Like if it's gonna cost me a lot of money, it's better than costing me my life, honestly. So
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no, things are definitely evolving, and it's important that, like I said, for students to be part of this conversation. So, appreciate you being involved with ZeroNow, and
yeah.
you got to get involved and be proactive with your safety and share your ideas with this community and with others.
Thank you so much. This was very insightful and very helpful in terms of getting the word out there about campus safety. So thank you so much.